The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome to this SolidWorks webinar, Accelerating Medical Devices Innovation and Improving Patient Outcomes. We have three presenters on today, and I'd like to introduce them now, and then we're going to jump right in as we have a lot to cover in a short amount of time. So starting off, Andy Calambi is the CEO of RIZE, and they're the customer that we're talking about today. Andy is a mechanical engineer by training with experience in enterprise systems, innovation platforms, and now additive manufacturing, and is passionate about building inclusive and sustainable ecosystems. Prior to RIZE, Andy spent 17 years with Dassault Systems in leadership positions as CEO of Innovia and executive for 3 experience platforms. Next, also from RIZE, we have Alex Orfanis. He's an applications engineer at RIZE who has worked in various industries from injection molding, R&D, aerospace, and additive manufacturing of metals and plastics. Alex first learned SolidWorks in college back in 2010, as a lot of us did. Maybe not 2010, maybe earlier. But Alex also has a passion for science communication and discussing complex science concepts in the simplest ways possible. Excellent. And last but not least, Suchit Jain is a strategist in engineering with passion to help entrepreneurs turn ideas into products. I've been lucky to work with Suchit for many years as he is Vice President of Strategy at Dassault Systems, SolidWorks. He is leading the expansion of SolidWorks design software into the hardware startups, makerspaces, fab labs. He is evaluating emerging technologies, including IoT, 3D printing, AI, to integrate within design software to help customers design better products faster. And he is that busy, trust me. So thanks to all three of you guys. And before that, I just want to talk about GoToWebinar real quick. And we just recommend that you view in full screen mode, as we're going to be showing a lot of stuff on their screen there. Also, type your questions in. We're going to try to get to as many questions as we can during the presentation. And I always get this question. We are recording this webinar, so tomorrow you will receive a link to the webinar where you can download the recording and share it with others in your organization. So with that, I'm going to go on mute and hand it over to Suchit.
Well, thank you, Cliff. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to this presentation. And by the way, to set the record straight, we were talking with Alex earlier. He learned it in 2008 at WPI, SolidWorks, which Cliff, you were talking about earlier. Anyways, as we introduced RIZE, I wanted to quickly talk about Dassault Systems and SolidWorks, because life science is an important aspect of our business. I mean, you know, we always talk about this thing called as a emotional paycheck at SolidWorks, and Cliff knows this well. We've talked a lot about it. You know, something which you do, which is good for business, but good for the society at large, and life sciences is one of those topics. So before I jump into the medical device part of it, I want to talk about, you know, our mission at Dassault Systems is same as yours. You know, help and improve saves life. And we think that we can help do that better, and we can help do that faster. So Alex, if you can jump to the next slide. Yeah, so as we see here, and you probably have seen in the last few years, Dassault Systems is invested in this overall life sciences part of it quite a bit, you know, because as we know, things are becoming more and more complex. So not only you have medical devices, you have molecular therapies, these days digital therapies, and then healthcare services, and really the unmet medical needs can be solved as all of these things are taken holistically and not just independently. And so at Dassault Systems, we have taken that challenge to help our customers solve this complex puzzle, if you will, and we provide the tools to kind of do that. Now, if Alex, can you please move to the next slide? So where we are today, and a lot of you guys are very familiar with this, and you know, it's kind of the topic of the day, if you will. We provide the 3D design tools and the platform to take your product from start to finish. But we also provide, you know, when it comes to medical devices, the virtual testing environment, and we are seeing that 3D printing has begun to change the medical science, the way we design. There is the prototyping aspect of it, but also the material science behind it. And we have seen a lot of examples, just at SolidWorks. Part of my job is to work with a lot of our customers, meet with them and figure out some of these things which they are, the challenges they are facing, etc. So you see up on this slide, this under this prosthetic limbs transforming touch. This has been happening quite a bit, as you know. There's close to 18 million amputees in the world, and with the help of 3D CAD design and 3D printing, a lot of these needs are being served. You've talked about, we have heard about wheelchairs quite a bit in different cases. So that's up there too. But there are three examples I want to just very quickly, briefly mention before we jump to RIZE, which kind of will give you a symbol of where the medical device industry and this whole life science industry is going with the help of CAD and 3D printing. So if you jump to the next slide, Alex, I want to talk about something which is very close to me, and I have visited these guys. Some of these pictures you see on the right-hand side, my right-hand side, are the ones I took myself personally, but at the Boston Children's Hospital. I live close to Boston, and they have this place called Sim Inventor Space. And what they do is they use a lot of these technologies and tools, including 3D printing, to go from ideation, design to fabrication, and help a lot of the doctors and medical professionals, nurse, etc., to plan for surgery, and even solve very complex problems. So this is one of a very unique thing, and I would say they are leading the charter in the country, and there are several other hospitals doing the same thing. If you go to the next slide, Alex, another very interesting company, Biomodics, which we have been working closely with, their idea is to produce essentially surgical simulation. So with the help of a lot of different ways of producing, call them the digital twins, they again allow doctors like Boston Children's Hospital to be able to do these kinds of things and practice surgery. Another very interesting one, and this is kind of starts going into the future. If you go to the next slide, Alex, is a company called CellLink in life sciences, and they pretty much talk about printing life because they use bioinks or life type of materials, skin, things like that. For example, you can produce biorobots which can swim, which can feel, which can touch using these materials. So you can see, there is this convergence of CAD for the future with 3D printing, but not just your traditional 3D printing, but what will happen in future with the material science. These three examples are talking about. I'll close with the last slide for me. Where we are headed, right? And maybe it's not even where we are headed, but in some ways where we already are, because if you think about this second bullet here, bionic brains. A lot of you last week probably heard on the Neuralink from Elon Musk at Tesla talking about the brain implant. So it's not even about the future, something which is sort of, we are right at the cusp of that happening. Again, with the help of a lot of the 3D printing and CAD happening in there, including the robots which are designed, like when Elon Musk was talking about the robot which which has designed the implant or will do the implant. So things like that are all, not just the implant itself, but all the tooling around it as well, just like any other project. 3D printed limbs and organs, I mean, we already started to see in the previous three examples, and this idea of instant prototyping. I mean, today we can get prototyping, but it's not, it still takes a little bit of time. But I think we are getting, down from days to hours to minutes, and things are improving more and more. And, jumping to sort of this the first point, which I'll talk last about, this internal sunshine kind of seems like this Twilight Zone idea where you can even not have a bad day, if you will, and it kind of is connected to what the bionic brains part of it, where you can play around a little bit with some of the the implants in your head in future, where you can actually improve some of the suffering which people have. So I think we have a very good future. And maybe to give us a little bit more insight into some of the 3D printing aspects of it, I'd like to introduce Andy Colombi, CEO of RIZE, and he'll tell us more about it. Andy, over to you.
Thank you, Suchit. Good afternoon, good day, everyone. Thank you, Cliff. Delighted to be here with all of you guys. This is a breakthrough moment for us, working with our both our principal. We use SolidWorks and the whole 3D experience platform portfolio, as well as we are a close partner to SolidWorks. So thank you for this community to join us as we talk a little bit about what we are trying to do for the life sciences industry. Next slide, please, Alex. So a quick introduction to the company, RIZE. We are a startup based out of Concord, Mass. I'm right now sitting in my office. Not too many people in the office nowadays. We are singularly focused on two topics. One is safety. How do we ensure that the 3D experience, the 3D printing experience is completely safe and usable anytime, anywhere? And we'll talk a little bit more about that and what the UL Green Guard does to that, certifying that experience. And the second is we believe life is in color, so we think that all 3D printed parts should be in color. And hence we create fully functional parts which are in full color. Sometimes they don't need to be in full color, they can be in monochrome, but color adds to a lot to the experience in terms of traceability, in terms of instruction, in terms of intelligence to the part. We've been accorded the World Economic Forum Technology Pioneer status this year. We're the only 3D printing company in the world to be recognized that, and we're blessed with that. Our focus, next slide, please, is really around these three topics, and I'll let Alex walk us through these three topics. One is safety, as I mentioned. We want at every point, and this is no better a time, there couldn't be a better time than this to talk about health and safety. So safety is a big topic for us. How do we drive intelligence in workflows and in the parts themselves so that things can be compressed? What Suchit mentioned, how do you do prototyping much faster? How do you create traceability of those parts? And the last thing is, how do we add color almost to everything so that it creates an enhanced user experience? And of course, as engineers, you're able to communicate a lot of complex topics in a much simpler fashion. So Alex, over to you. Alex, you're on mute.
How about now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate it. But as Andy just said, this trifecta here is kind of where the rest of these slides are going to focus around. So you will hear it. We'll drive the point home here and get into more of the specifics here of how our systems can help enable the life sciences with our 3D printing. So the RIZE platform itself, at its core, is based around kind of this first order principle of, let's start with the material science first. We can take out a lot of the issues that we have to deal with from a 3D printing perspective. I come from the maker background, so a lot of FDM. And the reason why I have a printer in my home right here without any ventilation is because of this material science first aspect. So if we talk a little bit on the left here with the 3D printing platform, we're using augmented polymer deposition. So we're using an extruder that you could see that you typically can expect on an FDM printer, and we're combining that with material jetting to get functional color in our parts. So we're depositing a raft on the base to make sure we're getting a nice flat part, adding a release ink to that bottom so that support can come right off, and then we're building the part, adding color where it needs to go, and we're able to have zero to almost minimal post-processing to add things like QR codes and marking, to add that intelligent workflow in to get documentation. And then we're able to get full, vibrant, full color parts without having to worry about things like moisture and the great thing about the Rizium-based material, the cyclo-olefin-based composite. So that allows us to extrude at temperatures that are typical what you'd expect with FDM, but with close to zero emissions, and that's where our zero emissions, and our UL Green Guard is based around that. Our inks as well. People that are familiar with full color may have experienced color that needs to be stored a very specific way, handled a very specific way. You don't have to worry about that with our color. And one of the things that obviously with our working together with 3ds and SolidWorks and the Dassault platform, we're able to get that safety and intelligent workflow and adapt to what's been happening in the world here. So we're able to use this platform, get a connected environment, and with our printers and our safety, we're able to put, as you can see here, this is our CTO, Eugene's basement, and literally in his basement, he added both our RIZE and our 2XC, which you can see there on the right. Was basically able to put this system into his basement right next to where he works out. It's in his gym, so he's now able to get a great view, work at the same time, get full color parts, and basically continue work without having to worry about where do I put this? Do I need to go into the office? Those types of things that nowadays seem to be a pretty regular occurrence. And this here gives you a good example of the connection between SolidWorks and the parts themselves, going seamlessly from SolidWorks platform, designing your part in here, and then basically with one click, as you can see here, export to the one-touch software with RIZE, and then we're able to apply color. Here we're working with a RIZE 1 platform, so monochrome. We're able to orient the part very simply without having to worry about spinning I think with some of these programs, you'll end up spinning the interface around a lot. We're making that very simple to use, apply graphics, wrap them around a part, and apply them. We can even add QR codes, as you'll see in just a second here, rotating to the top, adding that image in, and then simply putting the QR code in place. And that just allows for a more seamless operation. You're not having to bounce back and forth between different programs, but you're able to get a part that you can then print and go to the next step. And one of the other things that we were able to use is using, again, the 3D platform to go from the entire process, having the entire catalog of parts that you've designed, not having to re-export them. You're able to do it seamlessly and get the platform to work and not have to worry about that interchange that happens sometimes with things that don't work with the platform. One of the areas that we'll talk about here is that's important to the life sciences medical device innovation. So we're talking functional prototyping. On the top left here, we've got a functional analysis that's actually put into the part surface, so you can run your analysis and have a physical model to go with that. And then we have some neat guides there for surgery and labeling them, so you're not thinking in the middle of surgery, what am I working with here? And then there's preclinical prototyping tools and jigs. So basically, adding a revision to the part itself to know which revision you're on, not guessing, having to look back at the file and figure out where am I with this development. Anyone at a glance can know. And then with jigs and fixtures, especially from the CMM aspect, documentation that goes into operating a CMM, the qualification paperwork, everything that may need to go into it, maybe temperature controls, can be added to a QR code, saving the operator time and getting this out and done correctly every time. And just to discuss a little bit more about the materials, we have our Rizium 1. All these materials are based off the Rizium 1 platform. The added benefit of the composites with carbon and GF give you added strength. And with the GF, you're able to get a color option that has high strength, so you can get those functional full color parts. And the Rizium base gives you a lot of material properties. You get a moisture resistance that comes with it, which for most FDM is not something that you get to work with. And we noticed that especially with the COVID-19 issue with parts absorbing moisture, and what can you do? How are you able to do that? Little to no moisture absorption with us. Chemical resistance, your acids, your bases, your polar solvents, you're able to put these in environments that typically would, maybe just for the ease of use, especially if you're marking a part. I think we had someone discussing this the other day. They're in an environment with high acids, high bases, and they're able to label and not have to, and do more with it without having to worry about the parts breaking down. They're getting more out of it. The other thing with color parts is, if you put a color part on your, say, desk window and you have UV light shining on that the entire time, is your color going to last? With the Rizium material that we offer in our inks, you are going to get that. And then sterilization. So the other thing, of course, going back to COVID, we're able with the Rizium platform to sterilize using gamma and ETO processes, which again, with the COVID response and makers around the world, that was one of the big issues with getting. Many people wanted to print, but they couldn't get into hospitals because they couldn't verify it, they couldn't sterilize it. We're able to do that. The high temperatures of autoclave aren't usable, unfortunately, but you have the option to sterilize, which most times you don't.
Alex, do you mind just going back for a moment?
Sure, not a problem.
So I want to mention just a couple of things in addition. Our materials are engineered for life sciences applications. So we chose a material which was already being used. The base material was being used in the pharma industry. And it had clean properties, as well as it was USP Class 6, US Pharmacopoeia Class 6 certified, which means it was biocompatible. What that means is that it can be used, of course, on the body for up to 30 days and inside the body for up to 24 hours. That made it suitable for a wide range of applications. Now, our original intent was not just for life sciences, but for all industries. We wanted safety. And we wanted to ensure that this material was safe enough to be used while you were maybe sitting at home or while you were eating something. You didn't want contamination. Of course, the sterilization and those aspects of it and the ability for chemical resistance has come in even more handy now, because people want to sterilize everything with isopropyl alcohol. And that's perfect for us because our material withstands isopropyl alcohol up to 70%, whatever that is being used currently to sterilize stuff. So it's extremely safe in that respect. Alex, if you could just move back and show that video once more, the SolidWorks video, just so that we can kind of show the end-to-end flow. I don't know whether that's, yeah, the left one. The left video, yeah. Could just go a little further. So as Alex said, there is, of course, an integration, a close handshake to the SolidWorks software. But in addition, after this part is, and this is our slicer, and this has both slicing as well as bit mapping capabilities. So what it does is it allows you to, of course, print text, images, color into it. And as Alex mentioned, the printer is designed, again, for ease of use, 15 minutes training, and anyone should be able to use it. And that's why we want this printer to be something that should be available easily and can be placed anywhere. That's why we put it in people's basement so that they could continue working during this. And that's, by the way, Alex's basement. And because it's a zero emissions printer, and mind you, that's an industrial printer. What you see here is also the technology at work in terms of how the printing happens. And one of the unique elements in this is the ability for the printer to not just, as Alex said, print, extrude the material, but also jet in inks. And you'll see here the part being built. And as the part is being built, you will see the jetting of the inks that is happening. And these inks are jetted in a voxel level. So every droplet of ink is actually inserted into a voxel. And there are up to 7 droplets that are introduced at what is called a picoliter level. And what essentially is happening inside the printer is actually the creation of what we call a metamaterial, which means that actually it is changing the material properties as it continues. Alex, the video seems to have frozen.
How about now? Am I still there?
Not yet. It seems to have frozen. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So that's the print process that is going on. And as the part is getting printed, you see that it's not just printing the part, it's also printing information. And this is especially relevant, as Alex will talk, in the medical device arena, because The FDA requires you to do document, describe, identify. And then the last part, which Alex talked about, which is purely the ease of post-processing, another headache that most 3D printers have, which is where you have to hack the supports or you have to use some chemicals to remove the support. None of it is there because we put in another ink between the part and the support. And then, of course, the ability to, as we said, document, describe, and identify, which means full traceability to the original part and the original model. And this is very critical, especially in med device innovation, where you're doing many iterations and you need to prove the full traceability of parts. One of the things I must mention that our customers do is sometimes they load multiple iterations of a model on the same build tray, and they mark it incrementally so that and they don't have to worry about which belongs to which because they have a full traceability. So back to you, Alex.
Sure. No, thank you, Andy. Those are all great points. Yeah, and going back on the USP Class 6, from working with people that are developing medical devices, there's always hurdles of making sure that you classify something to be okay. We've done some of that initial work up front to get it certified with Rizium 1, which should help get that procedure to go a little bit quicker, even though I'm sure people want to certify themselves to make sure. And as far as the different types of parts that can be made, if we look into intelligent parts and adding color in the manufacturing environment, we talked about jigs and fixtures and having those available to have not only part marking, but QR codes for documentation. We've got quality control, again, just to aid in the inspection and QC process. So really in so many of the different stages that a part exists in development, a company, from packaging and logistics, health and safety, from ergonomic parts themselves, equipment and assembly, even adding part marking as I've got on this part here. Say if you want to help the person on the assembly line just quickly at a glance know what they're working with, from adding, in this case, a battery stand and knowing where to wire each terminal, it's going to help reduce error and make the process a lot easier, more intelligent workflows trickling down from the top to the bottom on the entire process. So personalized healthcare is kind of the other half of this, and we've got we've seen a huge jump in both procedural planning, and we talked about this before, pre-procedural planning and patient and family education, and these two can really help make a difference in healthcare today. The cutting guys themselves prepping before the surgery to make sure that with the own anatomy of the actual patient, instead of guessing and using generalizations of what anatomy looks like, we can actually start preparing a lot earlier in the process, and then the patients themselves understanding what they're going to be going through.
Can we just stay with that for a moment?
Sure, of course. Oops, sorry.
Slide, please.
Wrong button. There we go.
Thank you. So our idea here is to help companies really get very affordable models. So these models have been printed in the past in large format 3D or large, very expensive, not large format, but small format, but very expensive color 3D printers. And also these parts have been normally not functional parts, which means that they're very fragile. They're good for viewing, but they're sometimes very fragile and kind of break at the slightest this thing, so they're not easily transportable. Because we use composite materials, so our materials, as Alex mentioned, were carbon composite, glass fiber composite. So the composite element really adds to the strength and the durability. But in addition, you're able to get full color and at a very affordable price. So it's incremental price to, let's say, some of the standard 3D printing materials that you use. Next slide, please. Now, we've done a number of applications in this area. One of the applications which we are working on is really to focus on scan to print automation. Usually when an MRI or a CT scan is done, this is especially in the case of applications like in the area of orthopedics and cardiology. There's a CT MRI scan which is usually done, and then that scan has to go through a fairly elaborate process, a manual process of what is called segmentation, to really isolate the elements that need to be 3D printed, which are typically things like bones. That process is a very manual process. In addition, most of what gets printed is usually in a single color, where you lose a lot of context. So we've been working on creating a kind of a frictionless flow where you can take a scan, move it to a software, which is an AI-driven software, which basically eliminates the need of doing manual intervention and is able to come up with an intelligent model. And then that model can be quickly printed and given either to a surgeon, or in the med device area, it's often used for doing planning of creation of cutting guides and implants, etc. Next slide, please. So let me just show you a quick sneak preview of this. This is a new solution that we are building right now, but if you can just run the video, please. Come on. You'll see that this is the scan. This is the CT scan, MRI scan. And you will see that this scan has a lot of, other data related to muscles and cartilage, etc. And all that is segmented in an automated fashion. And only the bone is exposed, and not just the bone is exposed, it's exposed with a lot of information on it, simulation information on it, like, for example, density, etc. This is then moved into our one-touch software, our slicing software. And then what you get is essentially a readily 3D printable object that is 3D printed on our RIZE with color. And people, especially the surgeons, love it because it dramatically compresses the time. They used to take weeks to get a part in hand because of all the work that had to be done on the scan. And more importantly, they're able to do it at a fraction of a cost. It's like 10% of the cost of the model that they used to do earlier. So that's another example of an intelligent workflow. We're trying to build these intelligent workflows. One of the workflows that Alex showed earlier was what we have done with Dassault, which is around with SolidWorks, and then we are extending this to the 3D Experience platform. This came in very handy for us in these COVID times when we had to kind of, like many of us, get into a home office kind of environment. So that leads me to really the next topic, which is we talked about med device innovation. We talked about personalized healthcare, where we talked about anatomical models, models of hearts, models of hips and knees. But today we are still, unfortunately, in a situation where we're still surrounded by this this pandemic. And again, I must credit this to Suchit. Suchit was our inspiration to get onto this. Very early in this time, so I got a call from Suchit. He said, would you want to do something in this area? He connected us to a few hospitals. This just ballooned up for us and for many others in the 3D printing arena. We did our bit, and I want to just share a little bit about what we did, which was a little different. Next slide, please. So when we designed our, and many people were developing these shields, and we looked at the shield and we said, let's design something which has a little bit of value, additional value to it based on the technology that we have. So actually, this is one of our very good enterprising design engineers, very adept at SolidWorks. And he took the shields that were being developed, and he looked at, and we started speaking to some of the doctors, and we realized that they were using it all day, and these shields would fog, and some of them were pretty heavy. So he redesigned the shield. He designed it again on SolidWorks, and of course we used the 3D Experience platform. We were all sitting in our respective home offices, or home, I would say, labs and micro factories, I should say now. And he redesigned it with airflow. He redesigned it by personalizing it. So we used this. So this is one example of a shield. And you can see we personalized it with names. We put the names of the doctors. We put the names of the hospitals. We put some instructions around it. And because this material was totally sanitizable, it could be cleaned. It was reusable. So that was the good news on this. And we distributed this to a number of hospitals. we lost count of actually how many we gave out. Actually, we did a lot of these, but we ran out of this material. But that was really one of the projects. And then, of course, we got into multiple projects. We got into a project with mass robotics. Next slide, please. Mass robotics with a ventilator. We got into a project with an autonomous way of doing testing. So that was, and I think the good news for us in Massachusetts is we are in a much better shape now. We don't really need to worry about the shields anymore. However, Suchit, you were the original inspiration, so you did a lot more. So maybe you want to share what you did beyond what we got inspired from you by. Back to Suchit. Suchit, you're on mute.
Yeah, absolutely, Andy. Thank you. That was great. Yeah, I mean, I remember early days when I gave you a call about the early days when people were talking about PPE and the masks and all the other things, and you jumped on it right away. And I know you did a lot of work in your local community and with mass robotics, etc. And by the way, your printer, I know Andy mentioned that they are SolidWorks customers, so the whole printer is all designed with SolidWorks as well, which is also a fascinating story, maybe for another webinar. Yeah, I wanted to just quickly share, as Andy mentioned, early on at SolidWorks, we are always very passionate about, how do we, I talked about this emotional paycheck, and, when this COVID thing happened, we started to get a lot of calls. Of course, we had a lot of engineers, a lot of our VARs, partners like RIZE, and even customers who wanted to help in their local communities. So a lot of this initial thrust was around producing face masks. And in fact, I was running 7 printers in my home, and I know a lot of you, even people in the audience, I know a lot of our customers were doing the same in their communities. And then also there was a lot of work being done across the world on doing something with the ventilators, because there was a shortage of those kinds of things. Here you see 17 or 18 lists, which this is my own sort of personal recollection. I was documenting every time I would talk to our customer or a maker or somebody out there who's saying, hey, look, I need SolidWorks and I need it now, like this very instant, because I'm working on a project to help my community or whatever. Here are some examples, and maybe Alex, if you jump to the slide, I personally was, I would say it's not even because of work. I'm so thankful that I had the opportunity to be able to do this because it's so satisfying. I worked on one particular project with my friend Matt Kearney, who was at MIT but now works at Amazon Robotics. And he had this idea, and he was in a group of people across the world. Actually, there were like 6 different countries, and they wanted to design this N95 mask face respirator, which is reusable. And so they did that. They used SolidWorks, and then SolidWorks, because there were people connected all across the world, they used the 3D Experience platform. And I was very happy to see that within a day, we got everybody on the call, and we had everybody up and running with the tools. And today, if you go on Matt Kearney, C-A-R-N-E-Y, you search his name on Google, you'll see where this project is. It was very interesting. If you go to the next one, another very interesting, this is actually the result of some of the work we did in fluid dynamics together, because the whole idea was, this is a inhale-exhale cycle, and the percentage of carbon dioxide in there, which is represented with the red color, if you will, and how that was being, there is something called as a NEOS test, which any respirator, if they need to qualify, then they need to go through it. So simulation was helping quite a bit in there. If you go to the next slide, Alex, this was another very, very interesting project, because I got a call from, this is out of the blue, I got a call from a doctor who was a sleep apnea doctor, and Pankaj. And he had this idea of converting a CPAP machine. He did an open source project converting a CPAP machine into a ventilator. And so he wanted to use 3D printing, and his point was that within like under $20, he could do that, because there's so many CPAP machines available. So I jumped on the project with him. I mean, he didn't know SolidWorks at all. He's a doctor, right? But a lot of his students, this open source project, they were using SolidWorks. That's why he gave us a call. So of course we got him SolidWorks, but we did a lot of fluid flow simulation in here as well, because the whole idea was, they use this effect where the flow, the air, the contaminated air will not come in, when you're doing the CPAP machine, force flow scenario. So, and this is a 3D printed part designed in SolidWorks, which he was being used. And it's, I believe his project is under FDA. He's trying to get FDA approval. Again, it's an open source project, and there is this website, WED19. If any one of you are interested, you can go check it out. And there were a lot of other examples. There was a hospital in Brown here in Rhode Island. It was just amazing. And, for me personally, it was very satisfying in getting involved in the project. So if you go to the last slide, this is just a very small, Alex, if you move to the next slide. Oh, maybe one back. Sorry, it was just slow. No. Oh, okay, that slide got removed, but that's okay. It was just giving a snapshot of all the sort of the things all across our community. And when I say community, as you guys know, I'm passionate about the SolidWorks community. And when I say community, it's not just me or the employees of Dassault System, but it's partners like Andy and Alex. It is all you guys who are our customers, a lot of our partners and VARs. And it was amazing to see. I don't know if we count. I mean, if we count our community of all our customers and everybody, we are 6 million across the world. So, and I believe we had a role. All of us had a role to play in this COVID. So it was very satisfying. With that, I will close. I'll probably hand it back to Cliff, and maybe Cliff, if there were some questions or anything like that for any of us.
Yes, we have lots of questions. Hopefully we can get through all these. If we can't, we'll be sure and email you, reach out together. Let's just jump right in. Thank you guys all for a great presentation. A lot of great stuff there. Is there a shelf life to the RIZE material or the release inks, marking ink, etc.? Sorry, this is not my area of expertise.
I can answer that, and
yeah.
Alex can also add. So no, the good news is that the material does not absorb any moisture. So you can pretty much keep it on the shelf for as long as you wish. It does not require any special storage, like you don't need to put it in a dry box or anything like that. So the storage there is no specific time. It can stay for a long time.
Okay.
Alex?
So, he also
Sure.
asked, is there any expiration dates that had to be dealt with? So.
Yeah, none.
Yeah, none that we've seen. And I'll definitely say from working with a bunch of various, especially when you get to the stronger materials, you start working with ABS, nylon specifically. If anyone's worked with that on an FDM machine, you may get one good print out of it, and then it absorbs moisture almost instantly. And then you're putting it in a dry box every time. You're putting it into an oven. And that whole process, it adds up. It's kind of one of the hidden costs of 3D printing. And we're able to not have to worry about that. Even your environment, if you live in a place with high moisture, you may run into those issues more often, and you won't have to.
What's the smallest layer height you can print at, or print to, I guess?
Sure, that's a great question. So we're able to go up to 0.05 millimeters. With the composite materials, we've been printing currently at 0.25, just because the printing process is much easier. And because of the film, the actual fibers inside, that's where we're at now. Not that we can't get any better than that in the future, but we want to make sure everything is stable and that it works, and that's what we're working with right now.
Excellent, thanks. I'll keep going through these. I know titanium implants are a vital prospect. Precious metal clay is 3D printable, but changing size, sorry, I'm trying to edit this, as it is kiln fried to pure metal. Is this feasible for implants?
I didn't quite fully understand the question. I'm not sure whether.
We'll get back to you on that one.
Yeah.
Are you saying that my 3D scanned high resolution NMR or like scan can be directly a source for 3D printed implants?
Not so much for implants, but for models.
For models,
And
okay.
what we do is, yes, for models. We're basically pre-surgery planning models. And of course, it's not all kinds of stuff. So right now we've started with hips and knees first. Second, we have done cardio. So we have now the ability to do cardio models. You can see this is a full heart model. And we'll progressively do this, but these are the current applications.
Maybe I can add one thing which I saw at the Boston Children's Hospital. What they do is when they scan and they are planning the surgery, whether it's any implant or maybe even knees, etc., where they talk about customization, they take the scan data, which is of course a slice data from MRI or something like that. They put it in a software, and that software will then essentially create, reconstruct essentially the 3D of the internals. And then they can use tools like SolidWorks to design around that geometry and space to create the parts, if you will, and then 3D print them because you don't have to use traditional manufacturing process, especially for prototyping and practicing and things like that. And there are a lot of medical procedures coming in, especially which are at the knee replacement, hip replacement, to come up with not the medium, small, large, but a customized structure, because then it will heal so much faster.
Excellent.
And to go further on that, one of the things, having the ability to develop them for the anatomy itself, but in this case with the bone density that's being applied here, the surgeon can actually look at the bone itself and get an idea of where is the right place to drill, where is the right place to mount based on the density of that bone. Obviously, you don't want to drill in a place where it's too thin. With full color functional parts that we're able to offer, you're able to do that.
I'll keep rolling. What color file formats can you import into the RIZE software that drives the printer?
That's great. I mean, 3MF, you could definitely run those. We have the ability with the one-touch slicer to apply to surfaces with the paint option. We're able to mark directly in there. You could use a paint program. You could use Blender. You could use Magix. Any of those softwares that you're able to apply to surfaces. You can do that and make it easier if that's part of your workflow already.
You could also take a JPEG, right, and just slap it onto the part. So
Yep.
You could take a JPEG file and slap it onto the part, and the software or slicing software automatically wraps it around and applies all the relevant colors. And the bitmap takes care of the colors.
Sure, and 820,000 plus colors, Andy?
Yeah, 800. And one more thing, just in terms of file formats, STL does not print in color, but VRML, OBJ, and 3MF, all these three formats support color. And of course, SolidWorks outputs in all of those. So you can pretty much take a color model in SolidWorks and print it using any of these file formats.
Excellent. Just a couple more questions, and it's some I skipped. I think they're more direct questions. We can get back to you on those. But from your day-to-day usage with the printer, what is a typical failure that can be expected? Warpage, clogged print, heads, etc.
Sure.
Very good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I can say from my perspective, the surprising thing, and this isn't necessarily the answer, but the surprising thing is that the glass fiber parts seem to be working extremely well. And most of the issues that I do run into is from running the parts multiple times. The great thing about the printer right now is, once you start seeing some failures, you go back in, you do a quick calibration, a quick small part that you measure, you get the right amount of the material going out, and then you're able to go back in. The other thing is really, color ink on the jetting getting stuck on the outside, but with the procedure that we offer to give you kind of a time on when to do recurring maintenance, as long as you keep up with that, you're pretty good to go.
Alex,
Excellent.
you have a sample part for everyone, right? You have a nice gift.
I do, yeah. And so as you can see on this part here, but on the slide here, But this is something that we can help put into your office, into your home, wherever you're working right now, so you can see the technology itself. We've got both the glass fiber and the carbon material here, and then this is off the X-RIZE that's behind me here. So full color part, it shows you kind of the full spectrum. You know, this wood grain color here, that's here, it's a functional part. These all spin, the wide range of color, background, the QR code, and then we've added build data on the back here. So if you are interested, we've got a link. I believe Cliff is adding that to here. We'll also follow up with another link as well when we follow up with you guys. But if you are interested, we'd love to get a free part, sample part into your hands. You can test it out, maybe throw some chemicals at it, and really put it to the test so you can see what's available.
Excellent. I'll send that again here in a minute. A couple more questions, we'll wrap it up. So, can your material run on other FDM printers? Obviously not the ink, they said. So.
No, the reason why FDM printers, and we are releasing a series of printers which are jointly done with other partners. So one of the printers that is just out in the market is called RIZE 2XC. And that material, our material is running on that printer. The one thing that our technology has is a fusion of materials and inks. And that's why, you know, if you want to get that full experience of both the inks and the material, then of course you need to have our technology. If it's just the materials, then we have another product called RIZE 2XC, which is a much lower price point product, which is available as a partner solution.
A couple more questions came in. We may get back to these on email, but I thought this last was good. What is the learning curve on what are some of the resources to transition from STL to 3MF?
That's a good question. Andy, do you have anything on that? No, I have something.
You can talk to it and then I'll add to that.
Sure, yeah. So, you know, going from, if you're using an STL mostly, there is not too much of a large learning curve, especially if you're getting an X-RIZE and using our platform. There's just an added complexity. The great thing about an STL is it's very simple, triangular faces, and dimensionless, which can be an issue when transferring parts. But with the 3MF file, it is something that's a lot easier. You're bringing the color data where it's supposed to be. So it's a smarter version of STL. I think from working with it, I don't think there's a large learning curve working with the 3MF part, because most of the softwares that you'd be able to export a 3MF, it's just as easy as exporting an STL.
And of course, SolidWorks has a 3MF export as well. I mean, of course, you guys are directly connected, but also 3MF.
Oh, we got to mention it.
Excellent. Well, Alex, Andy, Suchit, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for joining. Again, you will have an email tomorrow with a link to the recording and also a link where you can pick up that great part from RIZE. So thank you guys again, and hopefully we'll see you at the next webinar.